Xiaoman's name is Suman. So far, Xiaoman's life has been very successful. He has loving and kind parents. When he got back a test paper with only 75 points, his parents gently praised him. It's worthy of being Xiaoman, he has improved by 5 points from the last time. After dinner, my grandfather, who was still healthy at the age of 70, went out for a walk with a bird cage. When he came back, he brought him a popsicle with white breath and shouted, "Xiaoman, Xiaoman, stop doing homework, eat some snacks first." There is an old cat who has been 12 years old. Every day, he just lies under the wall to bask in the sun. Only by touching its head will it snore lazily. There is also a boy who looks very good without laughing and looks better when he smiles. Xiaoman is his little follower. The boy is the direction, and everyone in the Qiahua district knows the direction. Xiaoman left school with a school bag homework on his back and ran into 3 students in his class at the intersection. Xiaoman subconsciously lowered his head to avoid it. Wang Jiashi, who was in charge, grabbed his school bag, imitated the little hooligan in Hong Kong films, and whistled frivolously, "Hey, do you know Sheriff Black Cat, your half-ear?" Xiaoman didn't speak. The shadow of the setting sun dragged him to the ground, folded towards the gray concrete pavement. "You must know, because you are half-faced?" The other 2 boys laughed and echoed, "I heard that when you take pictures, you only let others take half of their faces, right?" Xiaoman still didn't speak. Wang Jiashi stretched out his hand and shoved. Xiaoman staggered and stood still. Wang Jiashi asked with a smile, "Are you thinking about it? Are you not his follower? He doesn't care about you at this time?" As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a voice coming from the opposite side, "Your uncle is here. What's the point of ridicule?" Fang Xiang held a popsicle in his mouth, took a bite, and chewed it creaked. He threw the popsicle that had not been eaten up with his hands, stepped over the low guardrail, and jumped up. Fang Xiang is not easy to mess with, and he has a reputation. As soon as he raised his eyebrows, the 3 boys ran away. Fang Xiang patted the dust that did not exist on his body, looked up at the dusty popsicles on the ground opposite, with only a wooden stick left, and felt a little distressed. "What did they say about you?" Xiaoman lowered his head and said nothing, and the tips of his little leather shoes rubbed against the ground one after another. Fang Xiang was a little impatient and reached out to push him. "I'm asking you." As he pushed, Xiaoman turned his head and pointed his right face at him. Fang Xiang was stunned for a moment and immediately understood. When Xiaoman was 5 years old, his left face was seriously injured by boiling water splashed from the kettle. From his forehead to his chin, half of his face was distorted, ugly, and almost disfigured. This is the only one in Xiaomao's perfect life, not perfect. 13-year-old Xiaoman and Fang Xiang were sitting on the side of the road, each holding a popsicle in their hand. When Xiaoman treats a meal, Su's mother gives pocket money very generously, so his wallet is always bulging. Fang Xiang creaked the pineapple-flavored popsicle. "Actually, I'm very annoying to you." Xiaoman smiled, lowered his head and looked at the tip of his shoes. "Yes." Xiaoman and Fang Xiang are half a year old, and they have known each other since they were born. The Su family and the Fang family have a good relationship. Fang's mother said since she was a child, "Xiaoman, your sister is younger than you have to give in to her and take care of her." Su's mother also instructed Xiaoman, "It's dangerous for a girl to play outside alone. Let him take you with her brother Fang Xiang whatever she does." So since Fang Xiang became sensible, he has been following such a follower behind him. "Today, I finally took advantage of his duty to escape early, but I was forced to do a heroic and righteous life." Fang Xiang turned to look at him. "I want to charge protection fees. If you treat me to popsicles every day, I will protect you and let you be my follower." Xiaoman's eyes were curled into 2 crescent moons, didn't it before? Fang Xiang bounced the wooden stick, and the wooden stick drew a line and steadily fell into the garbage truck next to the road. He stood up, raised his thumb on his head, and pressed it, like a cap. "Now it is officially certified." Xiaoman was stunned. The sunset was very good that day, and the orange-red warm light hooked Fang Xiang's figure and was clearly imprinted in his eyes, just like the fingerprint printed on his forehead. On the way home, Xiaoman stood up and followed Fang Xiang for half a step. He stepped on his shadow all the way, looking at the 2 shoulder blades hidden under his loose white t-shirt, watching his irregular sneakers kicking stones and bottle caps along the way, and finally looking at his hands. According to Su's mother, Xiaoman, who was well-behaved and gentle at birth, suddenly began to cry every night at 3 months, and she cried for half a night. Mama Su is neurasthenia and cannot sleep all night. Once, Fang's mother had something to do and temporarily sent Fang Xiang, who was 9 months old, to the Su family. Xiaoman, who cried loudly, stopped crying when he saw Fang Yao, who was sleeping soundly, blinked his eyes and waved his fists. Mama Su smiled and pulled Fang Xiang's hand over and pressed it against Xiaoman's small fist. Xiaoman, this is brother Fang Xiang. Later, when Fang wanted to turn over, his palm accidentally reached in front of Xiaoman. Xiaoman opened his mouth and kicked his finger with relish. He fell asleep as he kicked and never cried again. Fang Xiang turned around to see if Xiaoman had followed, glanced at his palm along his sight, and glanced forward half a step forward with disgust and alertness. Why are you staring at my hand again? Xiaoman smiled, your hands look good. Fang Xiang flipped his palms and scratched his head, does it look good? Xiaoman felt that Fang Xiang's amazing things were different from others. When his peers were still struggling in the mud pit, he had already jumped twice in a row and became the only child prodigy in Xiaohua district who had finished elementary school at the age of 10. When the words monkey is anxious suddenly started to teach and strive to improve, he wanted to harvest one competition trophy after another with wildfire. Xiaoman said seriously, Fang Xiang, you are so awesome. Xiaoman became Fang Xiang's little follower, stupid. Orange soda, game hall, playing games, all-night movies, cycling, two people's three-legged. 3 years are like a colorful marble. Xiaoman will follow him to various competitions. Xiaoman kept his ID and the student's lunch for the secretary of AO. He ran to the classroom to find him and handed him the money. Carrying 2 sticks. The pineapples are coming and going to feed them lunch break. He sat in the seat at his desk. Stop all the official duties that come to harass him. Later, almost all friends knew that he had a small follower. I often joke with my follower when I was away. Xiaoman follows him every day and likes him very much. I heard you met when you were wearing open crotch pants? Have you been married to a baby? I can follow you. How about you be my follower? Xiaoman only smiled, did not answer or argue. So some people said that Xiaoman would neither be angry nor sad. He would remain indifferent no matter how others said bad things about him. I'm afraid he was a fool. Little fool. Xiaoman didn't care, he just devoted himself to being a young follower. Xiaoman wants to be the same age, but he is 2 levels lower than him. The 3rd year of high school is not as good as the 1st year of high school, and the evening self-study must be held until 10:30. Xiaoman finished his homework early at home, ran to the window with the time, watched a figure gradually appear in the darkness, and shouted to the downstairs, Fang Xiang. Fang Xiang raised his head and nodded lazily. Xiaoman greeted his mother and went downstairs with the newly baked cupcakes. Fang Xiang was crossbody with his school bag and was lowering his head to change his shoes. He glanced at the plate in Xiaoman's hand. What is this? Are you hungry? Have a taste. Fang Xiang picked up a bite, looked at Xiaoman's eyes full of love, and said vaguely, it's okay. Xiaoman smiled shyly and touched his nose. I baked it for the first time. I picked up a little pineapple you like to eat. Fang Xiang looked at him and smiled. Xiaoman followed Fang Xiang into the house, and Fang's mother immediately served the carefully prepared nutritional soup and also served Xiaoman a bowl. Fang Xiang took a sip of the soup. Your monthly exam results are out today, right? Xiaoman, let me show the test paper. 10 minutes later, Fang Xiang turned a few pieces of paper and pointed to the dazzling red cross on the paper, feeling a little disappointed. It's so simple, why are you wrong? Xiaoman, why are you wrong so many times on the test paper? Fang Xiang knocked him in the head angrily. He lay on the table and giggled. Does the follower also look at the grades? Xiaoman has always admired one thing. Fang Xiang is obviously mostly absent during class, but he can still easily keep his grades first in the grade. Of course, embarrass me. The word shame is a bit harsh. Xiaoman smiled subconsciously before asking, then can I be a follower for you for the rest of my life if I have good grades? Xiaoman looked in his clear eyes, with expectations that he had not noticed. Fang Xiang did not answer, so he took out his pencil bag from his school bag and said, I'll explain the question to you. As soon as he put his school bag, Xiaoman glanced at it and saw a white butterfly-shaped hairpin on the inner bag. That day, Xiaoman was extremely absent-minded. He started to figure out the problem and came to his senses after finishing the problem. Remember? Fang wanted to give him the test paper for correcting the wrong questions. If you have explained the questions once, you will not be corrected. If you make mistakes, you will be punished. How to punish? Fang Xiang thought for a long time and scratched his head. I think about it, you go back soon, I'm going to sleep. In the next monthly exam, Xiaoman was still wrong, with the same type of questions, but Fang Xiang did not punish him, nor did he explain the wrong questions for him again. But because of Lin Xia. Lin Xia is an art student in the liberal arts class. She learns dance. Her steps are light when walking, and she is as elegant as a swan floating in the water. Xiaoman knew that from the first year of high school to the third year of high school, many boys were secretly paying attention to Lin Xia, including Wang Jiashi, who was trying to explain the wrong questions in the early days, but now he is still in the same class as him. During evening self-study, after the teacher left, the classroom started to clamor. Wang Jiashi kicked Xiaoman's legs in the chair. "Xiaoman, do you want to listen to gossip?" Xiaoman buried his head and corrected the wrong questions for the test paper he just sent, just pretending that he didn't hear it. "Don't you want to know about Fang Xiang?" Xiaoman paused and left a small mark on the paper. Wang Jiashi was dejected. "I saw Fang Xiang going to have coffee with Lin Xia. The weather after the snow in early December is so cold." As usual, Xiaoman went to the supermarket convenience store after the fourth class in the morning. The boss of the convenience store bought a machine to heat and keep the canned beverages in heat. Xiaoman bought 2 cans of warm coffee. After going to the classroom in the 3rd grade of high school, he found that Fang Xiang was not there. Fang Xiang's desk mate kindly gave him the way. "Xiaoman, do you want to drink?" "I want to go to the rooftop." Xiaoman opened the damaged door of the lock, and a cold air hit her face. The snowy sky was gray and dim, with flock-like clouds piled up. Fang Xiang squatted against the wall, and the hem of the down jacket hung on the ground. When Xiaoman approached, he found Fang Xiang was bored playing with a box of matches. As soon as the match was pulled, the flames ignited, and when they burned to the end, they were destroyed. There was a candle on the ground in front of him, the kind that was inserted into the birthday cake. He subconsciously took a step back, his voice trembling. "Brother Fang Xiang." Fang Xiang lifted his eyelids. Can you destroy it?" Fang Xiang paused and remembered that Xiaoman was afraid of fire. He felt a little irritable and pressed the match on the ground with water. "What are you doing when you look up?" Xiaoman was stunned again. Fang Xiang's hair was covered with mud and water on his collar. "What's wrong with you?" Xiaoman hurriedly reached out and wanted to turn his head to avoid it, a little impatient. "What's the matter?" Xiaoman hesitated for a moment, handed him 2 cans of coffee, and whispered, "You have to take political class in the afternoon, don't doze off." Fang Xiang didn't take it, so he stood up for a while and said, "You drink it yourself." But Fang Xiang pressed his temple. "Can you stop following me?" But Xiaoman touched his forehead. "You were still young at that time, and I was still young." Fang Xiang put his hand in his pocket in his clothes, looked down at Xiaoman who was lowered his head. Half of his face was pretty and cute, and the other half was hideous and terrifying. "I still have half of my face and I'm about to cry, and half of my face will help you. Learning it's you who serves your own snacks." After a moment, Xiaoman smiled and looked down at the pool of water on the ground, reflecting his own reflection. "Okay." Fang Xiang finished speaking and left. Xiaoman squatted down and placed 2 cans of coffee at the base of the wall. He rested his chin on his arm and stared at him for a long time, until the wind wrapped in snowflakes into his neck. He shivered and shivered. Back in the corridor of the classroom, a white figure suddenly appeared in his sight. Xiaoman squatted down, took a step back, and pressed against the railing handrail, looking at Lin Xia holding several exquisite gifts in her arms. The box passed by with a girl. He wore a blood-colored wool coat with a small hair accessories on his hair, in the shape of a white butterfly. When the wood-scented vine is blooming, it is approaching the season for the college entrance examination. Xiaoman's seat is facing the window, and the strong fragrance of flowers in the evening breeze swings over, making people fall into a drunken and slightly drunkenness. The reason why Xiaoman is called Xiaoman is because he was born in the Xiaoman season when the wood-scented vines are blooming. On Mai Qirji's birthday, the cake was baked at home, and the room was filled with sweet fragrance. Grandpa sang 2 Peking opera to celebrate his birthday. The old cat lay on the corner of the table and was napping. After dinner, everything was cleaned up. When Xiaoman was about to fall asleep, he received a call from Fang Xiang. She hurriedly put on a coat, but went downstairs to see Fang Xiang sitting on the steps on the 2nd floor, carrying her school bag loosely on her shoulders. Due to different work and rest time, Xiaoman has had very few opportunities to meet him in the past 6 months. Fang Xiang turned his head to look at him and patted the steps beside him. Xiaoman walked over, sat down, and a gift box was stuffed into his arms. "Happy birthday." Xiaoman was overjoyed. "Do you remember my birthday?" "Can't you remember? My mom was talking about it a month ago." Xiaoman's smile faded and he held the gift box seriously. "I heard you refused to take the lead. Are you very busy now?" "It's okay." Fang Xiang glanced at him and turned his eyes to the air window that fell into the night. "Xiaoman, do you feel uncomfortable when others talk about you?" His tone was a bit cautious in this sentence, as if he had thought about it many times. Xiaoman was stunned for a moment, and his heels gently knocked on the steps, and laughed softly. Mom has taught me 4 principles since she was a child. First, when you don't know what to do, smile first. Second, your love for yourself is strong enough, and other people's malice will not hurt me. Third, your mind is far more powerful than others' desires. The outside is important, but most people love beautiful faces, so don't blame them. Fourth, this article 4 won't tell you. He stood up with a smile, shook the box in his hand, jumped up for 2 steps, and remembered something, and handed a paper bag in his hand to Fang. I baked a cake myself, and I picked up a little pineapple pulp. Xiaoman, wait a moment. Fang Xiang took it, stood up slowly, his eyes level, and he stared at Xiaoman's left face. Have you ever thought, well? After a moment, Fang Xiang shook his head, it's nothing. He stepped forward, pressing his palm on his shoulder. Let's go up together. Xiaoman met Fang Xiang again on the day the college entrance examination ended. There was a noisy voice in the classroom and a friend who was thinking about the whole room. As soon as Xiaoman showed up, someone would laugh and shout, Xiaoman, you are here. Xiaoman stood at the door and smiled. He saw Fang Xiang wave to him before walking over and sat down next to him. Fang Xiang handed him a drink, looked at him, and was stunned for a moment. Xiaoman subconsciously touched his hair. I just finished washing and didn't do it. I was going to play with my parents in KTV. He used to tie his ponytails, but this time he put his hair on his back, so. He lowered his head on the left at that time, just covered the left face. They went by themselves. Fang Xiang stood and distracted for a long time before he remembered to pick up the microphone from the table and hand it to him. Sing? I won't sing, Dad and the others went there by themselves. I heard that you were asking me to play with you. When I came out, Uncle Fang asked me to tell you not to drink. Xiaoman shook his feet and looked at him. It's been a long time. Xiaoman fell asleep directly on the leather sofa in the private room. He woke up in a daze, and most of the people at that time had left. He rubbed his eyes, and then he realized that he was pillowing Fang Xiang's shoulder and was about to sit up when Fang Xiang grabbed his arm, and his heart trembled for no reason. He raised his eyes to the gaze above, and the light hid in silence. It is different from Fang Xiang who rushed around in a toy car when he was a child, from Fang Xiang who likes to eat pineapple-flavored popsicles, and from Fang Xiang who is handsome and beat people. It is completely unfamiliar and has never seen him. Xiaoman felt that he should smile at this time, but the muscles in his body were not in control. He just instinctively held his breath and felt that Fang Xiang's breathing smell was getting closer and closer, stopping at a glance. Fang Xiang seemed to wake up suddenly and pushed him in panic. Why are you? I thought. Xiaoman was stunned, and after a while, he smiled. Brother Fang Xiang, it's time for me to go back. That's right. Fang Xiang sat down and didn't move. You don't have to send it. Here, I'll just take a taxi. He walked straight out of the door, and the air floating towards him had the strong smell of wood-scented vines. The phone in his pocket was vibrating. I don't know how long it had been. He picked it up, and the other end was the trembling and rapid sound of Grandpa. After the whole summer vacation after the funeral, I thought I had never seen Xiaoman. Before school started in September, he called Xiaoman, but no one answered. The house upstairs was empty. He went to knock on the door and heard the monotonous dong-dong sound constantly echoing. Later, Fang's mother heard some news one after another, saying that Xiaoman and his grandfather were at their aunt's house in another place. It probably won't be back. Xiaoman's grandfather lost his daughter and son-in-law in his old age, and his spirits and health were also broken. He had to undergo surgery after suffering from serious illness, and the house here might also have to be sold. Mother Fang sighed, it's really a blessing and good fortune. Can we help? Mom Fang, I told Xiaoman that it's very good at my aunt's house. I also asked me to take him to say hello to you and ask if you have been admitted to the school you want to go to. The windows were wide open, and it rained the summer before yesterday, and the leaves of the wood-scented vine fell all over the ground. Mom was still wiping her tears secretly. What a silly girl. Fang Xiang sat in front of the window, the thick green shade and the fine sunlight shook in, and he lowered his head and could not think. The deep dream keeps falling. Fang Xiang University is in a northern city, with sand flying through stones in spring and snow covering the long streets in winter. He celebrated his 20th birthday at the age of 11. Lin Xia from the dance academy came to see him with a cake. In order to maintain his figure, Lin Xia only ate a little vegetable salad and barely drank a glass of wine with him. Fang Xiang in college is not like in high school, where people are rushing around, but live a 3.1-minute life in the classroom, laboratory, and dormitory. Many of the high school classmates have been disconnected, and only a few have maintained contact, and Lin Xia is one of them. During holidays, 2 people gather together to have dinner, chat, talk about bad food, talk about the moonlight and long river in their hometown, that's all. Lin Xia sighed. When you were in your senior year, you were only 16 years old. At that time, you were so high profile that even the teacher thought that you had good grades and turned a blind eye to you, but I just think you were very naive. Fang wanted to smile and didn't refute. It's been 4 years, Lin Xia sighed in a lengthened tone, but she didn't put down the bowl for a long time. After a long time, he looked at the time, took out his sunglasses from his bag, and put them on his nose like a female star who was afraid of being photographed secretly, stood up, and looked down at Fang. Thought, you eat the cake slowly by yourself. Fang Xiang said nothing, and watched Lin Xia go out and leave from the corner of his eyes. The bell hanging at the door jingled and the world fell into silence again. He took the cake brought by Lin Xia and took it apart, but the 8-inch cake had some pineapple pulp on it. He pinched the fork and cut off a corner, and choked as soon as he took a bite. The familiar smell was like a spell, raiding overwhelmingly. He stood up in a hurry and pushed the door open and chased him out. Lin Xia, who was about to enter the subway station, heard the shout and stopped. What's the matter? Where did you buy the cake? Fang Xiang was panting. After 4 years of standing in a dream, he never smelled the fragrance of wood-flavored vine in early summer, nor ate anything with pineapple flavor. He often dreams about the day when the college entrance examination is over on a quiet night, and sees a girl with her pupils slightly opened under the dark lights. He had a crush on the chow pie that never existed before, and the last sentence she said to him was, "Why are you?" He thought that as a punishment, he would never have any news with Xiaoman again. In early summer, a very small cake shop hidden in the deep alley. In early winter, the sun is thin, and behind the red wall, the branches that stretch out are trembling. Fang Xiang followed the sign one by one and finally saw the sign hidden in the vine branches. A small blackboard stood under the steps, and a ginger kitten lying on a soft cushion next to it. Fang Xiang stood at the door, twitching, and was about to go in when he suddenly heard the bell ringing at the door, and a young man walked out with a bouquet of bright roses. The man stood still, glanced at Fang Xiang's face, and said in surprise, "Fang Xiang?" Fang Xiang glanced at him and felt a little familiar, but he didn't recognize who it was. The man pointed at himself. "Wang Jiashi, I almost got beaten by you when I was in junior high school." This awkward self-introduction finally evoked some memories from Fang Xiang. Wang Jiashi carried the rose on his shoulders and exchanged a few greetings with Fang Xiang. Fang Xiang asked him, "What are you here to do?" Wang Jiashi smiled and said, "Proposal." Wang Jiashi's eyes fell on him, and he settled for a long time as if he was exploring. He opened his mouth as if he had something to say, but in the end he turned around and left without saying a word. Fang Xiang stood at the door for a long time, watching the dozing kitten awaken, looking at him with his eyes open, and then he mustered up the courage to push the door and go in again. "Welcome." Behind the counter, a man raised his head and looked at Fang gently with a smile and thought, "What do you want to order? Is Su Man working here?" Fang Xiang looked around. The man said, "Are you here to find Xiaoman?" Fang Xiang's breathing slowed down and he nodded. The man turned around and lifted the curtain behind him. "Xiaoman, someone is looking for you." A soft voice came out. Fang Xiang felt as if he had finally run out of that deep dream and slowly rose. When he saw the curtain lifting up and revealing a pair of clear eyes above the mask, he could finally breathe again. Xiaoman's eyes flashed, and for a moment, a surprised voice sounded, "Brother Fang Xiang?" He walked to the counter and took off his mask. "Long time no see." Xiaoman looked at him, then looked at the man beside him. "Can I go out for a while?" The man looked at him with a smile. "The wages will be deducted." Xiaoman touched his nose. "I'll be back soon." Xiaoman took off her white chef's uniform and gloves. Fang Xiang glanced at his finger. When he went down the steps, the kitten at the door meowed. Xiaoman squatted down and touched its head. The kitten snored comfortably. "Where is that cat before?" "He passed away the same year as his grandfather. He is almost the same as his grandfather. He is already very old. Later, he doesn't even want to eat the best cat food." Xiaoman's voice was calm. Fang Xiang's throat was bitter and he could hardly speak. "I've been looking for you at your aunt's house." Xiaoman gently stroked the kitten one after another, and then smiled for a long time and said, "I know, my aunt told me." He stood up and said, "Let's go deep into the alley, let's go and have a walk." The alley was winding and narrow, and the air was cold, and Xiaoman's ears were quickly blown red. The wind was cold, and someone stared at his left face, watching him smile calmly, without putting down his raised hair, and just exposed it openly. When he arrived at a dilapidated wall and the withered vines, Xiaoman squatted down and unconsciously stroked his hair. The engagement ring he wore on his left middle finger swayed in the sun, making it even more conspicuous. Is it Wang Jiashi? Xiaoman turned his head and said, "What? Your fiancé?" Xiaoman smiled and said, "Of course not." After saying that, he lowered his head a little shyly. "It's Wang Jiashi who just stood at the counter. He said he came to propose to you, but I refused." Xiaoman seemed even more embarrassed, rubbing the ground with the tip of his shoes one by one, just like he used to do. "I used to bully me if I liked me. Maybe I was stupid and couldn't feel Fang Xiang didn't know the so-called comfort." It seemed as if one hand rubbed the condensed dirty snow on his heart. The pain is hard and cold. The story goes back to the story. Since Fang Xiang recognized Xiaoman, the young follower, Fang Xiang had many ridicule and gossip in his ears. The young self-esteem struggles to maintain a balance between commitment and irony. All this was broken when Lin Xia appeared. Lin Xia is the kind of girl who makes people feel that she may have fallen in love at first sight. He should be everyone's first love. Fang Xiang accidentally picked up Lin Xia's card and took the opportunity to get to know him. Fang Xiang was arrogant and lived in the attention of everyone since he was a child, and did not think that his confession would fail. But Lin Xia asked him, "Don't you like your little follower?" Fang Xiang subconsciously denied. How could he not like it? He is still so safe. He told Lin Xia about the origins of the two families, the tasks assigned to him by his parents, and the childish agreement when he was 13 years old. Lin Xia smiled and said, "Okay, I will agree to you whenever you terminate the agreement." On the day on the rooftop, Fang Xiang had an argument with someone. The person who disliked him deliberately found fault. "I heard that you were rejected by Lin Xia for Su-man Fang Xiang. I can't tell that you are actually a love species. You are not really going to spend your life with your ugly little childhood sweetheart, right?" Fang Xiang was angry, but he didn't know what was in this sentence. After getting rid of Xiaoman, he found that he was not relieved, but instead fell into increasingly anxious self-questioning. He did not allow anyone to insult Xiaoman, but he could not control himself to recall the slander of Xiaoman. He rationally understood that a person's mind is more important than appearance, but he cannot avoid imagining it. Is there any way to remove the dazzling burns on his left face, such as one being over? Fang Xiang skipped 2 levels in a row and was called a genius by everyone, but psychologically he was an absolute childish ghost. It was not until something happened at Xiaoman's family that he gradually realized that the self-struggle of those years was ridiculous self-esteem, and he wanted to maintain his image in front of everyone, but he could not escape. What is becoming increasingly clear is that I really like Xiaoman. When he bumped into the urge to kiss Xiaoman, he ran away in panic. He regarded the promise he had made gently as a cage, and regarded cowardly escape as resistance. Wang Xiaobo said, "All the pain of a person is essentially anger at his own incompetence." In the cold wind of November in the north, they walked a long way. Fang thought, who was late, poured out all the backlog of hardships over the past 4 years. "Xiaoman, I'm sorry." Xiaoman still smiled like that. "You are not sorry for me." He turned his head and looked at him seriously. "I think I may have liked you too, but I didn't understand it at that time. That day, you thought I treated you as someone else's pain, but it turned out that it was because I liked me, so I was quite stupid. They all said I was a fool." "You are not stupid." Xiaoman laughed crisply. "I am always called a fool by him now, and I forget the time when I make the cake." After a pause, "How did he meet?" "He is the son of a friend of my aunt. He was very patient and always accompanied me during the most difficult period when my parents died in a car accident. With his help, I am no longer so afraid of being angry." Xiaoman was a little tired from leaving, so he stopped and rested against the wall. He paused, and then covered his palm on his forehead. He closed his eyes slightly and passed through his eyelids in the sunlight. The thin sun in early winter was clear red, which reminded him of the sunset that day, and the young man's palm that stamped him under that sunset. After letting it go for a while, Xiaoman raised his head to touch Fang Xiang's forehead. His fingers were a little cold, and Fang Xiang felt as if he was trembling, but he knew very well that he was not because of the cold. "I'll give you the seal back today." "Brother Fang Xiang, I'm sorry, I can't be your little follower anymore in the future." Xiaoman looked at him with a smile, and after a while, he spoke again. "My mother has given me 4 principles since she was a child. The last one is, if there is anything that makes me sad, then avoid it from afar. No matter who it is the Wang family or Fang Xiang. I now have a store, a lover, and a cat I just received. Although the business in the store is not particularly good, he can make his favorite cakes every day according to his heart. The lover is an architect and will come to the store to help when he is free. Not a very powerful person, but he will tell him, if you are really unhappy, don't force yourself to smile. The kitten is only half a year old and is very naughty. He will catch all the hairy things in the house in a mess. Xiaoman felt that all this was perfect. Xiaoman smiled and stretched out his fist. Fang Yao stood at a loss, a little confused. Xiaoman grabbed his hand and clenched it into a fist and opposed it to his fist, just like what Su's mother did when he was half a year old. Brother Fang Xiang, I hope everything is perfect. Before graduating from senior year, Fang Xiang returned home. The place where the Su family once lived upstairs moved into a new resident, a couple who had just gotten married. When Fang's mother stewed the soup upstairs and sent it to contact her new neighbor, she accidentally knocked over the bowl, scalded her fingers, and washed them under cold water, but she was still scared. Fang Xiang, do you still remember? When he was a child, he always sticks to you, always following you like a little adult, saying that brother Fang Xiang, I want to protect you when I grow up. At that time, we were playing in the countryside with Su Jia. There was a kettle on the hot iron rack. You were messing around and got the rack. Xiaoman was only 5 years old at that time, and his reaction was so fast that he pushed you away in an instant. Fang's mother was afraid of fire, so she, a girl, broke her appearance like this. Later, she was afraid of fire and didn't even dare to touch the lighter. Aunt Su Jia is considerate and intelligent, and she told me not to mention this matter all the time, so as not to have a psychological burden. Fang Xiang's hand was trembling, and the following words did not reach his ears. There is wind. A strong fragrance of flowers floated in from afar. It is the wooden vine climbing the wall downstairs. He suddenly remembered very young. Xiaoman squatted under the wooden vine and said with a smile, Brother Fang Xiang. When you smell this scent? Xiaoma remembers that Xiaoman is about to celebrate his birthday. Don't forget a stupid and childish boy. How unconsciously squandered a girl's kind love. He could not forget the scald, branded on his iron rack. It is even more imprinted on his heart. In order not to let the tears roll in your eyes, I raised my head slightly.